Today is on, it's just called parts work. It's on defense mechanisms, ego states. So it's not one of those heavy ones that I get the privilege of talking about. So it's more about how to work with those from those heavy ones that we talked about, child abuse and all of that. So we get to realize, maybe how these defense mechanisms that we have, how they're formed, kind of their roles in our lives. They're called ego states. It's just another word for them. We just put both of those here. We're going to talk a little bit about dissociation, what that means. And we're also in the middle of all this. I have a couple of handouts we'll be using, a couple of tools to use. And so we'll get rolling. And it's cool in here, so that's good compared to outside these days. So, hi. One of these ego states, there's actually some biblical references to that, and one of them is this one out of Hebrews 4:12, and so it's, for the word of God is living, it's active, sharper than any two-edged sword, it's piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the hearts. So it talks about those areas of us. There are multiple parts of us, and how the Word of God is able to penetrate that and work in us on those. So it's a word that's also used for these parts is our soul. And so in just talking about that, in Greek, soul just means to breathe, or the breath. It's also psyche is really where all this, what we're talking about. Synonym of that is soul. It's also, our psyche is the totality of our human mind, of our conscious and unconscious parts. Also, you can call it the human mind, the soul, or spirit. So, we know that we're all physical, spiritual, and emotional beings. So here we have the mind, soul, and spirit. And so I could ask our college students here. Psychology, it's right behind me, but psychology simply means it's the study of the soul. And so we get to work with that as therapists, as counselors. Soul is our psyche, our soul is a very complicated but simple part of us. And so we're going to look a little bit at how it kind of works. So I gave you a handout. Did I have enough for everyone? Okay, good. So we're going to look at this diagram of the human psyche. And what we see in our counseling rooms is that we see the top part. We see the behaviors. That's usually what they're coming in for. This is happening in my life. I don't know how to deal with it. And so I'm behaving in certain ways, or people are telling me I'm behaving in certain ways. That's the top of how our psyche operates. Another way of looking at it is like an iceberg. So, you heard the tip of the iceberg. Our behaviors are the tip of that iceberg. All that stuff below, which is a lot, is what's driving our behaviors. So that's carrying a lot of weight And what presents itself is our behavior. So it's just a small part of what's actually happening. So that we have all these parts. I'll just kind of go I'll go from the bottom up. We have core beliefs that are established. We'll talk about those. We have that core self of us. So this is a big anchoring point. Our thoughts come out of this. And so all of this is unconscious, really. We aren't aware of all of these things. We aren't walking around every day going, oh, my core belief today is da 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 da. We're not doing that. It just happens. It's our operating system. And we have a lot of thoughts about that. They percolate up, and then all of a sudden they become conscious. That thought just came up. Great. So we're getting more into the conscious part, and then we're coming into emotions. And when we put thoughts and emotions together, behaviors happen. And so that's what's going to come up to the top. In that thought process, I have that box on the right-hand side. We have all that, interpretation about everything that's happening basically down below. All of our self-talk that comes up about that. All of our self-made rules, or rules that our family has put upon us. Assumptions, defense mechanisms. So just before behaviors are skills. Skills should actually be controlling some of our behaviors. They don't always, because we don't have enough skills. So we'll be giving our clients, when we work with ego states, some skills to work with what's happening below the surface so that they can be more present in a better way above the surface. So those behaviors. We are going to be we're going to be focusing on the core beliefs and basically the core beliefs right now. The core beliefs is really what's driving the bus many times, especially when we're in any types of situations that trigger an earlier situation. When we work with all of this, it's really very interesting. I'll be giving you a personal example in a bit of how that happens. I'm going to skip down to defense mechanisms or ego states. So I'm just talk briefly about ego states before I talk about them more later. It's a state of our ego, and ego it's a psychological term. It's not about, well, that guy has a big ego. It's really not that type of ego. It's just really who we are more at a core. But these defense mechanisms are ways of managing the world around us. That's what a defense mechanism is. It's how we manage the world around us. When these defense mechanisms come up, they usually aren't helpful later on in life. Some of them are, but what usually we kind of our focal point is the counseling room. So when a client comes in and these ego states, the ego states come up, the defense mechanisms that are maladaptive, that aren't working well in life, in adult life, that's what we see in our counseling rooms. There are defense mechanisms that are helpful. That's not always what we see immediately. These defense mechanisms come out. They're, like I said earlier, they're triggered. They're basically stored in our limbic system, and that's a part of our brain I'll be talking about in a minute. They're triggerable without our knowledge most of the time. We don't even know it happens. It just happens, and especially if it's in a particular part of our limbic system called the amygdala. So, limbic system 101. Memories are stored as experiences. They're not thoughts, they're not words, they're experiences. That's something that happened. It's history. And so it's an experience. And all emotionally intense experiences are registered in our limbic system. The stronger ones, the ones that are very traumatic, they hang out in our what's called our amygdala. And they color our stronger emotional reactions to life events. They are immediate most of the time, and they're not easily, for lack of a better word, they're not easily removed. They're there. Once a negative experience, a traumatic experience is in the limbic system, it's kind of there. It's how we process it after the fact is what helps it to helps us to manage those experiences when they get triggered. So I gave you another handout. It's called the hand model of the brain. And this is a very simple explanation of what happens when life goes south. It's called the hand model of the brain because I'm going to use the hand to model the brain. This is not original to me. It's from Daniel Siegel. He does a much better job of this than I do. You're welcome to just write down Daniel Siegel. He's on YouTube, and the best one, the most succinct one, is about two and a half minutes long, 2 minutes 40 seconds or something like that. Because there's a lot of hand model of the brain, and Daniel Siegel's in a lot of them, but the shorter one is the more concise. So I'm going to use the hand as a model for the brain. So I do this a lot with clients. So as a lay counselor, this will be a tool to use with your clients to help them understand what's happening. Again, these things happen without our knowledge. These defense mechanisms jump out, and oh my gosh, not a thought process happens most of the time. So, hand model of the brain. So, this is my brain. I take it out every once in a while, deal with it. This is how it's situated in my head here. This is the front part. This is the cortex all around here. This is called my backbone, brain stem back up in here. Inside is a limbic system. Now there are a lot of other components to a brain, so this is very simplified. We're only going to be dealing with the brain stem, the limbic system, and the frontal cortex. This part right here, and we're really only going to be talking about this part. I can't independently move my finger, so I'm doing it this way. It's right here. It's our prefrontal cortex. That's where all of our sound, logical, moral reasoning takes place. Right here. So what happens is something occurs. I don't even know what to use as an example, but something occurs, say danger, and it's registered first off in our brain stem. And this is the oldest part of our brain. That's where the fight, flight, or freeze takes place. It's there for a reason. God designed it, pretty remarkably, that we don't have to think about the danger that might be coming. He's made us to be able to just instantly react. So if we need to get away from a situation, bam, we can just run. Or it's going to prepare us to fight. So a bunch of other things happen in the brain and in our system that prepares us to fight. Or we might freeze. It's like an animal response. If a deer's out in the woods and he's not moving, guess what? You're not going to see him. So that's like a freeze response. So if something happens, fight, flight, or freeze here in the brainstem, very closely related to that is the limbic system. And so we're going to have some emotions about that. We're going to have fear, anxiety, panic. Those are some of the primary ones. If we operate just out of these two, we're in danger, actually, in a relationship, in life. So what we want to do is we want to think about it. So this is where the prefrontal cortex comes into play. This has happened. I have these strong feelings about it. What is going on? If we aren't able to do that, if we aren't able to keep that prefrontal cortex connected to our limbic system, what happens is we flip our lid. We are not thinking, we're reacting, and it's damaging, especially in relationships, human interactions. So we don't want to flip our lid, because when we do, it can take 20 minutes, 20 hours, or days for that to come back so we're more functional. So, but we can operate here. We can go, ooh, I experienced this. Ooh, I'm feeling this. What am I feeling? And as long as we're doing that, we're keeping everything connected. It's when we just let it run, we flip our lid. So this is a good model to use, for yourself and for clients, to let them know what's happening. Because I'll use this, and I'll have a client come back into the room a week, 2 weeks later, and they'll go, man, I almost flipped my lid. And I didn't want to do that, because last time I flipped my lid, it wasn't pretty. So they actually had that, and they knew what to do. I need to think about what's going on. And so it can be really helpful to have that. So it's just a tool to use. It helps those defense mechanisms, helps us manage those defense mechanisms. Basically, defense mechanisms are just psychological ways that the unconscious mind deals with uncomfortable or traumatic situations. They can be positive, or they can be extremely unhelpful. They can be damaging when we just run with them. Some mature, helpful defense mechanisms. One's called sublimation. That's where we're just channeling those. We're just channeling those unacceptable impulses, those thoughts or the emotions. We're just channeling them into something that's a little more acceptable. I can deal with that. I'm just going to take this, kind of shove it over here, and I can manage that. Another positive one or mature one is compensation. So that's when we counterbalance a weakness that we might have with another area of strength. So I don't do well here, but I do better in this part. So I'm going to focus on where I'm strong here. That's a good defense mechanism. That's a positive one. Or assertiveness is when we just emphasize what we actually need, but we're doing it in a very helpful way, as opposed to being aggressive about it. Some primitive defense mechanisms. Do I have a sheet on that? I do. I'll hand this out later. So we have denial. Sure, that seems pretty self-explanatory. In the recovery, I do a lot of recovery work. In the recovery realm, we say denial is not a river in Egypt, because that is an unhealthy defense mechanism. So, I don't want to deal with that part of me. Nah, that's not there. And we deny it. And so we never, if we're denying all of that, we're never working on it. So, so these are primitive or unhelpful ones. Distortion is telling us that something is true and it's not. So that can be only seeing the negative side of a situation and not, only focusing on the negative side of a situation. So example I have here is, I failed that exam. I'm not good at anything. That's a defense mechanism. It's not helpful. It seems to placate us somehow, is that it takes the focus off of failing the exam to I'm just a bad person. And so we never get around to working on the real things. Projection. That's when we're putting stuff on another person. I knew you'd be that way. I knew you would react that way to me. So it's a defense mechanism. It's defending myself by pointing the finger at you. I'll probably talk about that in addiction, because that's a primary area of addiction. It's so easy to just flip everything and point it at the other person. Dissociation. Dissociation is there's a whole spectrum of dissociation. What we normally see are more just like, that didn't really happen. That, I don't feel like it's that important. So it's kind of just a removal of self, for a removal to put some distance between us and what's going on. So it doesn't seem as real. Repression, the avoidance of thinking about anything uncomfortable or painful. We're pushing it down, and we know when we push things down, they pop up somewhere in our life. Not helpful. Reaction formation, that's converting an unwanted or dangerous thoughts into their opposite. So, yeah, we broke up. This is an example I have here. We broke up, but I'm better for it. So that painful experience of breaking up, we switch that. Well, I'm better for it. We're defending that ego part of us, our psyche, from hurt. We think we are, but we're not. Again, a lot of these are just subconscious. Intellectualization is just putting a lot of logic and reasoning into something to make it sound better, more palatable. So there's 3 components of defense mechanisms. There's the memory. So those are any images or sounds or smells involved whenever that memory is recalled. Smell, by the way, is probably the fastest way that something pops up to us. Sound is pretty fast too, but smell seems to be about the fastest. So, you walk into a bakery, and it might take you right back to 6 years old when your mom took you to a bakery, and you had your first chocolate chip cookie or something. It's instant. You smell that, you're there, you feel like you're there. So 3 components: memory, then there's meaning. So that's the interpretation of the event. So again, in the realm of the counseling room, we're seeing the negative parts of all of this. So it wouldn't be about, it's not usually about the chocolate chip cookie. It's about something that's a lot more hurtful. So, trying to think where I am here. Okay. It's the interpretation we put on that event. So, it's usually at the age or the mindset of the individual at the time. So here's where ego states come in. It's a state of being. So that's a lot of times what happens is at the age that an event happened, a traumatic event happened, that is an ego state. It's something that's just part of us. It's not a separate identity, although it can be, but that's rare. It's more just, that's a part of me. It's, again, like the chocolate chip cookie, and you smell that in a bakery, and you're just instantly back at a younger age. That's an ego state. So we have the memory, the meaning, and the emotion. The emotion are the event-driven feelings that come up. They're, again, at the age of the client, and their interpretation of the event at the time of the event. Memory, meaning, and emotion. We can't work with what happened. It's history. We just can't work with that. We can't go back in a time machine and make things different. So we wind up working on primarily the meanings and the emotions that come up. I do a type of therapy called EMDR, stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. That's a way of really being able to set aside the event that actually happened and then working with the emotions and the meanings. It's just a different way of doing it. Ego states is another way of doing it. I find that EMDR is a better way of working with large traumas, or what some people call big T traumas compared to little t traumas, but a trauma is a trauma. So we can work with all of these defense mechanisms that come up because of events in life. They are based on our experiences while growing up. So our quality of care, what was that like? Was it poor? Was it destructive? Was it good? They're going to, our safety, any provision of love, trustworthiness of love, defense mechanisms. They interpret reality through the experience. So when we interpret our reality through the experience, what was that first word I used there? We interpret the reality through the experience. It's an interpretation, and it's not always correct. We need filters, and again, the defense mechanism tries to filter those things. Our sense of self in the world. Who am I? Am I good? Am I bad? Am I worth it? Am I not? Am I loved? Am I not? Sense of the world around us. World's a dangerous place. It's terrible. Oh my gosh. That can be a defense mechanism, but it's things that come up from previous experiences that we've had. It might be defense mechanisms filtering that capacity for relationships, the safety we feel in relationships. I do a lot of couples work. I love working with couples. This stuff comes up all the time. Couple, they're going through something, it's really hard, and these, they flip their lid. These things come up, they don't know how to deal with them, or they just deal with them through the defense mechanisms. But what we find is that in couples work, or really in any relationship, the person that's on the receiving end of whoever got triggered is going, oh my gosh, don't do that to me. So they're taking, it's all about me. You're hurting me, and you are attacking me. You're terrible. You're doing this. When in reality, much of the time, they're responding to an earlier life event. There's an ego state within them that got triggered. And so it's not about the other person, or just a percentage is about the other person. So that's what defense mechanisms can really inhibit, is good relationships. Okay. We may have a conscious memory of the event or not. We may lack some meaning or emotion about an event. So oftentimes in doing a lot of trauma work, our defense mechanism, here's where the defense mechanism is beneficial, is where God has created this, where it blocks it out. You might call it denial, but it's really not. It's an inner defense mechanism that just blocks out the trauma so that we don't have to deal with it in the moment. The thing is, at some point, we might have to deal with it. So there's not always a conscious memory of an event, but I have worked with many clients where it comes out physically. So there's a somatic or a physical component that just pops up. Having a meaning or emotion from the event, again, lack of a specific memory. Defense mechanisms, they explain unexplainable patterns. So behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Why do we keep doing the same thing over and over? Why do I keep getting in that same destructive relationship? Different person, same problems. So those can be ego states or defense mechanisms that are driving it. So I'm going to share just a brief thing about a personal experience of defense mechanisms or ego states, or how they pop up physically. So I'm going to take a drink of water here. When I was growing up, my first distinct memory is probably around 11 years old, I think. Sitting at the table with family, having dinner. It was my mom, my dad, my sister, and myself. The perfect four family, right? And I'm sitting there, and I'm eating. I go to get my glass of milk, and I bump it. And the milk spills all over the table. My mom came unglued. And, my mom wasn't a mean person, but she just came unglued. She started yelling at me. You would think I got that glass of milk and went, "Watch this, Mom," and put it all over the table. That's the reaction I got. I did that a couple times, probably, in my early childhood. And so that reaction from Mom was not pleasant. I didn't want to experience that. So fast forward about 25 years. I'm married, sitting at the table. I'm now allergic to milk, by the way, at 25 years. Has nothing to do with this event. I'm not in denial. So 25 years later, sitting at table, glass of water, I reach forward, or I reach for something else on the table. I bump the glass of water. What do you think I did?
Sorry.
Pardon me?
You start apologizing.
Well, no, I did later.
Got ready for somebody to yell at you?
Exactly. I I bumped that, it went over, and I went
Yeah.
just like that. And my wife's going, what is going on? It wasn't a thought at the time. It just happened. It wasn't, oh my gosh, and I spilled that, and I remember when Mom did this, and now I better duck. I just did that. And that's what defense mechanisms do. And it probably took me a few years to get, once I realized what was going on, to get past that. It just comes up. And it wasn't about the water by that time. It was a previous event. And so those things stay with us. And sometimes they're very problematic. That really wasn't. But sometimes they can be very problematic. So whenever, let's just say, you're in relationship with someone, be it a business relationship or a friendship or a romantic relationship, and they say something or they roll their eyes and you just let them have it. That's what happened. You just let them have it. It's probably from something earlier. So that's just one example of how that kind of stuff works. Ego states or parts work. I'm throwing a bunch of terms for the same stuff out here because it goes by different names in the psychology community. Parts work, ego states, defense mechanisms. So they really start as coping mechanisms. An ego state is one of a group of similar states, each distinguished by a particular role or a mood or a mental function. Ego states are a normal, need to edit that. Ego states are a normal part of a healthy psyche and should not be confused with multiple personalities. So just because we're talking ego states doesn't mean you have a multiple personality. So whenever I work with clients and I introduce ego state work or parts work, I want to be very specific with them. I'm not talking about multiple personalities here. If it was, you'd be seeing someone else, not me. So they start out as a coping mechanism and they work. That's why they're so powerful. That's why they stay with us, and that's why they come up later on. We think they're still working, and they're not. So, like, say a person growing up, they're abused by a parent, and they don't want to do that abuse anymore. And so their best coping mechanism is to run and hide in the closet until mom or dad or brother or sister are drunk or they leave or whatever is going on. So that's a coping mechanism. Ooh, they're angry. Ooh, I see they're doing the same stuff. I'm going to go hide somewhere. It works. So it makes sense that we're going to do a similar behavior as we get older. And again, I see it in couples work a lot. So an argument ensues. That's uncomfortable. The person leaves. Now, they might not be going to a closet, but they're basically hiding. They're removing themselves from the situation. Sometimes that might be the best thing to do, but it's not helpful in the long run. So that's how ego states start. That's how they work early on, and that's how they become dysfunctional. Any questions so far? Any part of you have a question? No. Okay. So when we talk about parts, like the spilled milk, that happened at 11 or so, I think. There's other things that happen in my life at different ages. So I have different ego states around that. Now, we don't form an ego state around everything that happens in our life. But there's just ones that seem to be prominent or disturbing or even pleasant. We develop an ego state. Like I have an ego state of spending some time with my grandmother. That's a pleasant ego state. And if I look at a picture of that time, I'm right back there. I go, oh man, that's an ego state. That's a pleasant ego state. I have some not so pleasant ego states. So there might be the ego state or that part. We look at them when they're early on. They look at them as inner children. That's another term. Your inner child. Sorry, another term for you, but it's an inner child. Might vary in age. Ego states might have varying levels of authority. So there might be a part of you that is stronger than the other part. And so that might come up more. And so we don't always know how many or what we're dealing with in a basically in a New Days counseling rooms. We're working with 1 or 2 ego states, and that's probably sufficient. Ego states believe that they are maintaining safety or status quo. They also believe, so it's almost like, oh, this is a personality. It's not, but it's that part of us thinks that any punishment or any punishment could mean death to the system. So my role as an ego state is to keep you safe. And if I'm not here anymore, you're not safe. Sometimes anxiety is the battle of our inner parts of us. One part's just, we're not settled. There's no set number of ego states. There's no set order or dominance or anything like that. But knowing them can help find some patterns. It can be useful. That's one of the things that we do in working with clients that come in that we think might have an ego state. So I'll give an example of kind of a conglomerate of clients. Putting two together here. That this person is working with this person, older. So that's relative, by the way. Older is relative. And he never felt accepted. He never felt accepted. Comes into the counseling room. He's struggling in professional relationships. He doesn't feel accepted. And it's hurtful. And so what his ego state, what that early part of him, what that defense mechanism wanted to do is bad stuff. Don't want to deal with it. So one way that they thought would be a good way to deal with it was find some substances and start using those and just kind of numb out to everything that's going on. Very successful business person, but this substance stuff kept coming up all the time. Wanted to work on that. So what came out was this ego state, and it came out as a core belief. So back to that core belief, if you want to look at your chart there, I think I handed them all out, but at the bottom, there's some core beliefs. Do you mind, Karina, or I can borrow that? Is that okay? So concept of self, God and how I fit with him, other people and how I fit with them. So these are very broad core beliefs. So look at that bottom one, other people and how I fit with them. So this gentleman, he didn't feel like he fit, and his core belief was, I don't belong. I do not belong here. And the only way he could manage that was to use substances. So we started working with that core belief. I'll get this back to you. Thank you. We tried to identify that. And a way of doing that, I'll give you a kind of a way to do that, is you don't belong. You said that's belong. You don't belong. That's like a core belief. That's part of you. Did you feel that earlier in your life? So now we're tapping into an ego state. Did you experience that at a younger age? And this, I think, if I'm remembering right, in trying to blend everything together, he went to an age of about 8 or so, and he remembers sitting on a basketball field, a basketball court, and having a basketball, and nobody wanted to play with him. That's foundational. I don't belong. It could have been for him, it could have been I'm not good enough. But for him, it was I don't belong. He felt he had some personality quirks, and that made him not belong. And so he felt like he didn't belong. So when we work with ego states, we want to tap into that younger part. So what did you feel back then? What did you see? What did you experience? I know I'm not following the script I'm going to give you, but what we do is we get down to, because that ego state is, again, it's driving everything. It's that big bottom part of the iceberg that's driving all of the behaviors. So what we do is we work with the actual ego state, that 8-year-old. I had him, as a successful adult, I said, well, there's 2 ways to work with this. I don't know which one I used with him, but I said, why don't you envision yourself sitting down next to, I'll just call his name Bobby. My wife and I have a thing. Whenever we talk about someone, we're both in the psychology field, we'll just say Bobby or Sue. So Bobby sat down next to 8-year-old Bobby on that basketball court. So he's envisioning it. And there's a way to walk a person through this where I just had him sit down and, what do you think young Bobby needs right now? And he knew, our adult parts know, we know it. The ego state knows it. So he knew he just needed someone to sit with him and put his arm around him and say it's okay. Wow. He was better. He spent time doing that. That came up again. He knew what to do. It came up in his real world outside of the counseling room. He knew what to do. He got off of substances just because of some pretty simple ego state work. But it's that core belief we were able to work with. Instead of pushing it away and saying, well, that's a dumb core belief to have, that's basically saying death to that core belief, and they don't like that because they're very real. They're part of us. Don't put part of me away. Hello, I'm here. Don't do this to me. And so we're working with that. That 8-year-old needed to be held, needed an arm around him. So that's how a way of working with them. At a New Day, we do training in that. Have you done training in Eagle State here? Not yet?
No, not yet.
We kind of rotate through a bunch of different trainings. This is one of them. Clarice often does this. We can go into an ego state. Let's just say this was a person that experienced abuse. And we can go into that ego state, whatever age it happens to be, and we can have the adult part come alongside and say it's not your fault. Because oftentimes youngsters, actually teenagers on down, when stuff goes south at home, they think it's their fault. And so we can work with that ego state. It's not your fault. And it can really heal that inner ego part. So are you ready to do a little bit of breakout work? You're going, oh, I don't know. This isn't, you can make something up if you want. I just want you, it's on, I think it's on the sheet there that you have. Share a time when you were triggered into acting or feeling young. So like the spilled milk thing. You know, don't pick anything deep, you know, don't want to, you know, hurt you in any way. So just share that time and then look for a feeling in your body as you notice that memory. It could be, you can look for a pleasant memory too. That's fine. How old were you when you felt that? How old did you act when you refelt it? Do you remember feeling that way at other times in your life? Oftentimes there's multiple layers here. So, yeah, oh yeah, I felt that same, like this client that 8 years old didn't fit in. Years later, in a pickup truck, he had that same feeling because he was alone in the pickup truck. And I think it was, again, I'm combining a bunch of things here, but the rest of the scout troop was in the other truck. And he was all by himself. So once again, he's all alone. And he felt that. But he's older. You know, he's 13 or 14 by this time. So there's another layer there. And so we can use the same ego state process and just, you know, come alongside and talk to that ego state. So do you remember feeling that way at other times in your life? Do you remember the first time that you learned to feel that way? What do you believe about yourself? So let's look at a pleasant memory. Again, in the New Days, we seem to work with the negative stuff, but we get to work with pleasant stuff sometimes. So my grandma and myself, that picture that I can see, what do I believe about myself when I'm triggered into that happy place? Wow, I'm cared for. You know, or you know, I had a happy childhood, or whatever that belief. Usually, a happy childhood isn't really a belief. It's more of I'm cared for, I'm loved, or I'm not cared for, I'm not loved, I'm worthless. So just think about this, and are you up for doing that in breakouts of 2, 4, 6, 8, 2s and 3s? Nothing big. And if you're not, you can just, no, this isn't for me. That's okay. But to just go in and see about any earlier states. So I'll give you another one of mine is, my dad was a carpenter. I wanted to follow him around and do carpentry. That's all I wanted to do. But he would always tell me, I never use always, but he would always tell me, you're too small. You know, I might have been the smallest kid in school, but I'm not too small to do that. So, you know, and it's, oh, I want to do this. You're too small. You're going to hurt your wrist. That's what he would tell me. I'd hurt my wrist with swinging a hammer all day. You're too small to do that. You can't lift that. You're too small. So as I get into high school and someone told me, you're too small to play on this team. Oh man, that just, I didn't go into my childhood feelings really. I went into a defense mechanism of anger. Well, I'll show you. And then when I got into adult, when someone said, or I thought someone said I wasn't able to do that, a lot of times it was my ego states in me saying, they're thinking you can't do this. Well, I would do it. I would take that risk. Usually get hurt, but I would do it. So that's how ego states can drive us. So those, just look for those. Just can be simple things, and just look for how. Take your book with you, and just kind of share and try to identify these things on this in your little book there. Okay. So we'll do that for about 10 or 15 minutes. We can let's see. We can have a couple of you in here, and then we have my office, Clarice's office, and maybe we'll have 2 groups in here because we don't have any other. No, we do. We have the sand tray room. So 2 of you can stay here. 1 group can stay here. 1 group can use that room on your immediate left as you go out here. 1 room can use my office. 1 group can use Clarice's office. Okay? And I'll come around and see how you're doing. I usually give all the tools, try to give all the tools before we do the breakout and do these things. I didn't do that this time.
So that's what happened.
But it's purposeful because this is a much more, I think, relatable. We can because we're dealing with, you were able to identify some things in yourself, and so what I'm going to do is I'll be giving you the tools now. I actually heard them in play here, so we'll get to that soon. One thing I didn't mention is that I did mention we don't want to, death to an ego state. We don't want to do that, so we don't want to eliminate them. The goal is integration, because what happens with the ego state, sometimes they're here, they're here, they're here, they're not connected. We want more integration, so we're all working together. So it's one way of working with multiple ego states, which is very interesting. It's actually it's called the conference table. We have all these ego states at the conference table. It's very hard but interesting work to do. So like that puzzle, we want integration. We don't want these outliers out here. So when you were you able to identify some ego states? Positive ones, negative ones. I heard kind of a combo. What was that like for you to feel that, to know what that was? Anyone, or I'll have to make up answers.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. The ego state is uncomfortable. That's a way to look at that. Anyone else? Okay. What I heard in some of the rooms was, do you remember another time or an earlier time? Or how did that affect you in your adult life? I heard that. And those are really good questions, because it does get a client to identify. It gets us to identify. These are tools, by the way, that we want to give our clients, because they can actually do that themselves. I've had multiple clients tell me at subsequent sessions, I spent a lot of time with my younger self yesterday. They were hurting and they needed me. So that's good stuff. Because what happened before was not good. But they could identify an ego state and what it needed and soothe that, and they felt better. They didn't have to act out in ways they used to or relate to others the way they used to. So when we're doing this, to get towards that healing and growth, look at patterns. That's what some of you are asking. Do you remember an earlier time? Identify the source memory, if available. It just may be a feeling. Again, it might be a body memory. Name the primary emotion and belief running the pattern. I heard you say that in the rooms. So yes, that is a way. I'll give you two dialogues to use with clients too. But this is, I'm sorry that is not in there. So we're going to be doing those, and then we want the adult to remain present. We don't want them to dissociate or anything. We want them to be familiar, get in touch with those younger parts, their inner child. Provide what they didn't receive, what that younger part did not get. That is so prevalent in when we have these stuck parts. Something didn't happen. We didn't get something. We didn't get that nurturing. And so we know from research and a lot of psychology experience that this part of us was damaged in a relationship, maybe from a parent that didn't care for us. But if we can do that, and having a therapist there at the same time, we're now healing in a relationship. And so it promotes a lot of healing. So we want the adult to comfort and, the adult comfort and protection enables risking new healthy behaviors, new experiences. Because that ego state, the defense mechanism, doesn't want to change because they're kind of stuck and they're hurt. But they can be integrated and thereby change. So it's changing through that integration in a relationship. The reason this picture is here is it's that adult bending down to the younger child, touching them, giving them what they need. So it's working with our clients, or if we want to do personal work, working with ourselves. What does that younger part of me need? Now, I know I was talking with you here that sometimes a client may not know what their younger part needs. But we can ask a question. If you saw this happening to your neighbor child or your nephew, what would you do? They'll know instantly. And that's what the younger part of them probably needs. We want to self-soothe. That's the adult encouraging the ego state, not you as a clinician doing that. You're just guiding. You want the client to soothe, so it's self-soothing, that earlier part of them. They can come alongside. That's my favorite term. I don't know. I probably said it 100 times already tonight. Come alongside. They can come alongside. They can be with them in whatever way that means. They can say words to them. I got you. I will walk through wording with a client sometimes because they just aren't sure what to do or say. We want that adult to come and say, I hear you now. You're no longer alone. I'm here with you. I understand. I'm older now. You did it. You got us through that horrible part. Thank you so much. That is affirmation for that younger part. Simple words like thank you. So we want that child self to see and feel success. It's not, they played a role. They're part of us. We want them to feel that acknowledgement, because sometimes, again, it's that ego state that's popping up and saying, what about me? What about me? I'm here. Maybe they never got acknowledged. And so that's another key factor in ego state work. Help the child self trust the adult existence. Find a new, more functional adult role to play. Sometimes ego states do not work because we might have an adult that is really stuck in because of a lot of damage that's happened over the years to their soul. They can't even see themselves in any kind of role to help the younger part of themselves, because they're broken too. They feel like they're right there. They're still there. And so sometimes this just doesn't work. And happens occasionally. Really what we're doing is we're giving it a different interpretation, a different experience for that younger part. They're going to be more relationship oriented in a safe way. So these new experiences, so we're going to get back to the limbic system here. These new experiences actually rewire our brain. So our brain is very plastic. We've got lots of these connections. They can shift, they can change. And so what we're doing is rewiring that. The more times we rewire that, the stronger it is. Okay. So we do want to identify the ego state. Again, we do it, just what I heard some of you do. What's the feeling? What's the belief? Another word is, use the affect bridge. Basically, it's going in with feelings. So sometimes a client can't feel the emotion, but where do they feel it in their body? And you can have them touch that part of their body and feel it. I heard one person say they feel it in their head. And so, okay, that's an affect, and we can have them touch their head and actually, what's that like for you to do that? And that might be what that younger state needs, and then we can walk them into this process of healing that younger part. Again, what age? How long has it been hanging around? Is it attached to a specific memory? All things that we've already talked about that some of you did. I'll give you 2 sheets on how this works. One might sit better with you than the other one. So you might just feel closer to one of these dialogues than the other one. Again, create the relationship, the loving adult to the child. The adult can keep that younger part safe, because that's what they're doing, keep them safe. The adult part can give them permission to release that vigilance that they've always been, I've got to be here to protect you. The younger part might be doing that. I have to help you avoid all of this stuff. That's my role. No, we can do this together now. But thank you for what you did back then. It really helped. Togetherness, team, it's a connection. So this is a tool that we're giving our clients so that they can look at their current problem from a new perspective. They can look at future problems from a new perspective. There's a chance, a good chance, that they will notice that younger part of them, that ego state, that defense mechanism coming up early in this process. And they can keep the prefrontal cortex engaged and do this kind of work. And so they're not going to flip their lid. You can have that adult self brainstorm with the younger part. Sometimes this gets, I'll be very real here, this is kind of spooky. This is weird, but it's not. It's what goes on. It's what's driving so much is that those inner parts of us that need healing. Check for motives. Role play options. And remember, grace for new attempts. It might feel awkward, or it might, that younger self might not feel soothed. We can still work with the younger part. Go back to maybe another feeling. Reintroduce at another time the adult to the younger part. That experience alone is very, very helpful. Because another thing that we know is that when there's a rupture in a relationship, when that can be healed or worked on, it's stronger. It just works that way. It's usually better. And so if it doesn't work with the adult and the younger part, try it again. They will bond, and they will work together, and they will be stronger. They'll be more integrated. So let's look at some, well, we're not going to look at the severe abuse, but we're going to look at what happens. Severe abuse, much like some of the stuff I talked about in child abuse, all these things that happen early on, it can sever parts of us. So this is where dissociation occurs, can be where multiple personalities or dual identity disorders is what it's called now, where they come into play. Because there's a division, there's a very traumatic division, and they can be so severe that it doesn't want to be heard. It doesn't. It's keeping itself separate. But what it's really doing is trying to protect everything. And so when that's a structural dissociation is more of the multiple personality disorders, but there are, and so I'll just go also the dissociative disorders, dissociative amnesia, where we don't remember things. Dissociative fugue. That dissociative fugue, it is a dissociation. It's usually from abusive backgrounds, but it's where it usually involves travel, where some person winds up somewhere else and they don't know how they got there. And they might be there for a long time. Days, years. It's a severed part. So if that comes up and you're seeing a client, let Clarissa or I know. We will refer them out because they need different work. Depersonalization disorder, dissociative identity disorder. So depersonalization disorder is kind of like looking from the outside in. Like you're detached. You're not part of. So some signs of dissociation. So this is kind of written, well, they might be feeling disconnected from themselves. It's on a spectrum. Like, I kind of don't feel present here. I'm not part of what's going on. This isn't working. Intense emotions. When an intense emotion starts to come up, boom, it's shut down immediately. There's some dissociation going on. It's stronger than just a mild ego state. Sudden and unexpected shifts in mood. So we're talking definite shifts. You could see it in your client. It might be pleasant and then angry, or angry and then going to pleasant, or shifting back and forth. Feeling sad all of a sudden, out of the blue. Feeling as though the world is distorted or not real. Schizophrenia can be part of that. But it's when a client is just, not everything is real. It's like, again, from a distance. Might have memory problems that aren't linked to a physical injury or any medical condition. So memory problems such as they went through this traumatic part in their life and they have absolutely no memory of it. That's dissociation. It's a severed part. When it's that severe, it's a severed part. It's a severed part. Difficult to work with, not impossible though.
I have a question with that. Can you bring that out with EMDR?
Yes, you can. With EMDR, we're trained to do a lot of assessments ahead of time. So when I do EMDR, and when those that are trained effectively do EMDR, we start with a basic, it's called a dissociative experiences scale, just a 28 question assessment, and it just pulls out some things. Depending on how they score on that, depends if I'm going to give them a 378 question assessment. I want to know what's going on, because this basic one is showing some signs of some serious dissociation or some dissociation. And so I'll give another assessment that can pull out dissociative identity disorders and other dissociative areas. So yeah, EMDR I want to know ahead of time. I don't want to go into it and have that happen. Mm-hmm. It's hurtful. Let's see here. Yeah, I'll get a little bit working with that in a minute. Missing pieces of time, again, that dissociative fugue. Being called by other names or personalities. This is actually on my basic quest. basic assessment, it's one of the questions, has other people called you by different names? And most of the time I get, what are they talking about here? Who would do that? Well, if you're in a dissociative fugue, you might have assumed or have another name that you've given yourself, and you've been out in a party or out somewhere, and that's how they know you. You meet them somewhere else and they say, hey, Bobby, who are you talking to? So it's a form of dissociation. Significant memory lapses, forgetting important personal information, feeling compelled to behave in a certain way can be dissociation. Identity confusion, for example, behaving in a way that the person would normally find very offensive, very off-putting to them, and they're operating that way. What is going on? That's could be some dissociation going on. So another premise of those assessments is if any of these happened while you were under the influence of a substance, they don't count. Okay. So what do we do if we suspect dissociation? If we see that a person seems like they're just kind of out of it, or they're vacillating from one emotion to another emotion, or they just, what do we do? What do we want to do is we want to bring the client back into the room slowly. So a good way to do that, the first good way to do that is don't panic. Just, don't go, oh, what's going on here? That's not going to help. You want to bring them back into the room slowly. So a way to do that, if they're, you will probably not come across this in this drastic of a fashion. So what I do with clients I work with trauma, I'm doing EMDR, anything like that, I go through some things first. 5 senses is one of them. You remember the 5 senses? We did that here. If I'm sitting, I have a little soft snowball. Have I explained this before? No. Okay. I have a little soft snowball, a little furry thing that I keep on my desk. Because what I've used before works. I just like to have something a little softer. So if I'm writing notes, got a notepad there or something, and I see the client they're not there. They are not there. Lights on, nobody's home. I just go, okay, remember that exercise we did where I crunch up a piece of paper and I just gently toss it to you? They might not be looking at me at all, still, like nobody home. We're going to do that. So I'm going to gently toss that piece of paper to you and just toss it back to me. So it's phenomenal how that works, because they might be nothing going on out there. We see that, but that paper comes at them, caught it. And it might take 2 or 3 times. Magically, they're back in the room. It works. I keep, like I said, a little soft snowball because I don't like to waste paper. Maybe that's why I do. So you can do that with 5 senses. Again, gently. Remember when we did those 5 senses and we talked about 5 objects in the room? How about if we do that? Could you number and name 5 objects in the room? Might have to ask them a couple of times, or do it yourself for them first. Pillow toss, that's really the paper thing. I avoid pillows and anything hard or big. If that happens in your room, we want to know, Carissa or I want to know that happened, because there's a safety factor that they could still kind of be in that state a little bit. We just want them to be safe as they go home. So we want to make sure that they're able to drive, or if we feel a little uncomfortable, we can ask them, do you mind sitting out in the lobby for 20 minutes and just maybe do some of those other exercises we talked about, and then I think you'll be okay. So we want to make sure that they're gonna be safe. I have had clients go into now this is when I'm working with a very traumatized individual. You will not have this as lay counselors, where they're sitting there starting to go into a memory, and he just folded over on the chair, wide arms, so it kind of held him up, and he's just like that. Okay. I knew, because he was way over there, the toss wasn't going to work. But I also know, in talking, spending time with him, he liked cold objects, felt good to him. So he's like this. It looks like he's passed out. I said, what I would like you to do, the chair of that arm is cool. No, actually, I know what I use. The wall. The wall next to you is really cool. I know it is. How about if you reach out and just try to touch that wall and experience some of that cold? He's like this. Start to see an arm move towards the wall. And he did that. And then he did it like this. And then he put his whole arm against the wall. And he's coming back. And he says, can I pick up one of those rocks over there? Because I know they're cold. Sure, I have a thing of rocks on my thing. He picks it up and he's back in the room. We couldn't do any more work that day. That was pretty big. But that's how we can bring someone back from dissociation. Again, you probably will not experience that. Again, I think not panicking, being that calm presence of a counselor is one of your strongest tools. What's the first tool we always do? In counseling, what's the first tool? We listen. Just always remember that. We listen. We validate what's going on. We validate their feelings. And we are to be a calm presence in that room. They're coming to us. They're having a hard time in life. They need a calm presence. Wow, we're almost done. Gee whiz. So, a client with severe, layered, repeated abuse, yes, you are going to find that in the room. If you are a lay counselor, you're probably are going to have a client that has experienced layered or repeated abuse. So when you hear that, just assume this dissociation is a possibility. It could happen. And so just to be ready, think about the crumpled up piece of paper. Make sure you go over 5 senses with them. So if you have a client that has layers of abuse, that's a good indicator right there that I should do some grounding work with them. I'm going to do this for them, help them with that, with the 5 senses. you can talk to your client about it. Sometimes when people experience what you've experienced, what happens is what's called dissociation. We kind of feel apart from ourselves. We feel off. We feel distant. And so if that happens, and we're going to try this experiment. And so you can do the paper toss or whatever. Just make it, normalize it. Don't treat it as, oh my gosh, you got a problem, and this is a big stop. It's just something we work with. Discuss with the supervisor as soon as you can, what's going on. You can always, if you're seeing a client, they're in a dissociative state, you don't know what to do, just peek out the door and say, because all the counseling rooms are close enough to an individual, could you get so-and-so? You can even take a step out of the room with the door open and say, could you get Keith? Could you get Clarice? And then go back into your room. Always slow down. So like with the paper, I'm talking the whole time I'm doing this. I'm not going, that's panicky. I'm just talking, I'm being calm, and remember that what we did? Yeah, okay. So slow down. Just slow down. Take a breath. It's okay as a counselor to take your own breath. We need that. We're telling our clients to do that all the time. A little bit of self-care here. Just slow down. Take a breath. Keep all this engaged. Ooh, what's going on? And you'll do okay. You'll do good. Let the client determine the pace. Don't push them. Don't rush them. Be that non-anxious presence, because they need that. They need, when they're in a dissociative state, they need that. They usually know what's going on. They can hear, so they do pick up on your vibes. They will do that. So just be that non-anxious presence. So when we work with ego states, I'm going to back up a little bit. There's two dialogues that we can use. One is called integrating a child part, or an ego state. The other one is just simply called self-soothing inner dialogue. Clarice uses this one a little more. I use this one a little more. I've done it enough, I don't even pull out a sheet anymore, but so I'm going to quickly go through the self-soothing. The one that I'm a little more familiar with is that when a client is feeling triggered, so when they dissociate, by the way, they're fully triggered. They're done. They're gone. That's not coming back fully for a while. But when a client is feeling triggered, the defense mechanisms are coming up. We can give them this dialogue. We can walk them through it first. So it basically says go to a private room or place where you feel free of distractions. Counseling room, private place, free of distractions. Take a couple of deep breaths. Relax. Recall the feeling you had when you were triggered. So if we're talking about when this came up, what was that feeling? When that happened 2 days ago with you, what was the feeling? Where did you feel it in your body? I'm letting the client Give me all of that information. Some of you are doing some great questions in your rooms, and you didn't even have this. You were asking some great questions. Like both of you were asking great questions. So where do you feel it? Touch it. Put your hand to that part. Ask yourself how old you feel. Take the first age that pops into your mind. So here's where slowing down and let the client lead is helpful, because we don't want to force anything. EMDR, I use what's called a float back technique, where it's just let your mind float back to an earlier time. That's all. I'm not telling them I want the earliest time. I'm not directing them that way, other than just let your mind float back to where you felt this before. And we can work with that. Try to recall or take the first stage that pops into your mind, or just that impression of feeling younger. It might not be an age. It might just be a feeling. I just feel like a little kid. So the adult is going to tell that younger part, I hear you. I see you. I feel you. Any one of those. Try to recall what was going on, what the memory might be connected with that. Tell that part of you your current age, and you will protect them. So a younger part is coming up. I'm older now. So we're telling them, I'm older now. I'm this age. And I'm here for you. There's not anyone that can hurt you here. You're okay. We're safe. You can use the term we are safe. So the client is, if you're leading them in this, comforting that part of themselves that is a child. And that takes time. It needs patience. We don't want to rush them into that. That younger part needs time and attention. So we want to give them that. Thank that younger part for trying to help you. Let them know that what they are doing isn't helping. We're not condemning them. We're just saying, this isn't helping right now, but I will keep them. Let me think how this is written here. But I will keep you as part of who we are. What you're doing isn't helpful, but we're together. You and I are together, and we'll get through this together. Let's work on this together. Invite that part to go to the place in your inner world where it usually exists. I don't usually use this part, so I'm let me read this for a second, because I don't use the last two. Yes, okay. I don't say it like that. So we've worked on this. Let's just say I'm working with my younger ego state. We walked through this together, and they feel better. Feel good. Oh, I want to tell you, anytime you feel that again, I'm here for you. Just let me know. I'm here. So you're giving that ego state some strength and power and comfort. Well, I can ask. I can never ask before. You'll be there for me? No one was here for me before. That's what you're soothing, is that younger part. You can use a shorter version of this, but as long as you incorporate the main things. The other one is it's a different way of approaching it. Close your eyes, three slow, deep breaths. think about your current trigger. Think about what's going on. So you're asking the client to do that. Point out where you feel it in your body. So same thing we've done before. As you focus on those feelings, let a memory come up. Try not to think or force it. And just let me know when you have the memory. The client might close their eyes, oftentimes they do, and just have them nod when they have the memory. Now, that's, then you can ask them, can you tell me about it? They might already have the child memory, so that's where you're going to be starting. I have this, I have this feeling, I have this memory, I know what it's all about. Great. Discuss it. What happened? What did you feel? Again, going back into those feelings. How old are you? How old were you? What do you understand about it? What do you need? Go back to the feeling in the body. Help the client deepen the emotional sensation. So they're going to be kind of conversing a little more with the ego state. Sometimes the ego state, we might have them kind of retell their story, but that's, I usually don't do that because I work with a little heavily traumatized clients and I don't want them to go back to some of that stuff. I take care of that another way. So after you've done some of that, then you tell the 7-year-old, or whatever age, that it's over. What happened is over, and it wasn't your fault. I'm here for you now. You did the best job you could. Thank you so much. That is very powerful. When clients do that to their younger selves, you can see a relaxation in their body. It's pretty amazing. So you tell them those things, and then bring the client back into the present. One way I do it, does that younger part of you feel soothed now? Yes. Okay, good work. We can talk about that. You want to talk about that? What was that like for you? So another way of doing it is you can bring that younger part into a place of the client. So the client can bring the younger part into, let's just say the client has, I do this with calm places sometimes where, let's just say a person's calm place or their happy place, it goes by different names, is a rock high up on a mountain where they're viewing everything. That's their safe place, that's their calm place. I'll say, do you think the younger part would like to visit that place? Oh yeah. Why don't you take them there? Show them everything. Spend time there. If it takes 10 minutes in a counseling session, so be it. Just do that. Let them do that and say, and when they feel better, let me know. And that's kind of how that portion of your session would end. And again, you just say, you did good work. You did good work today. So that's how defense mechanisms, or psyche, and defense mechanisms plays a role into our behaviors and how we can work with the behaviors through ego states. So we're kind of did a loop here because we can change those core beliefs that happen. Now all of a sudden we've got a 7-year-old that is not I'm all alone. That's a core belief. Or I don't fit in. That's the one I was using earlier. That 7-year-old now doesn't have a core belief of I'm all alone. It says, I have help. People love me. I'm here. I'm not alone. And so we've changed a core belief. Now it might be for a period of time and we might have to do it again. But again, that rewires the brain. A few times of doing that, it can be a lot more solid. So there you go. Now you have ego states. You can. It's a tool that you can use yourself. It's a tool that you can give your clients. It's a tool you can use with your clients. in the counseling room. Any questions?
I was thinking about the term reparenting yourself that's out there. Is that really encompass what you're talking about today, or is there something more to that, or is that really what this is what that's all about?
It's kind of the same thing. It's a lot of verbiage.
Right.
Reparenting doesn't always work with wounded ego states because the term parent might not be a good term. So it can be a punitive term. So reparenting, we just don't use reparenting. Self-soothing, ego states, parts work, things like that. There's a big psychological movement now, internal family systems. So those of you in psychology, you might run across that. It's Richard Schwartz has really brought that to the forefront, and it's a lot of ego state work. Internal family systems. So it's an internal family that's going on, and we can work with it. Great question, though, because that is a term that gets used, and it's not always helpful. Anything else? Okay. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Enjoy 4th of July.